Hello, everyone, and welcome to our conversation today with European Commissioner for Home Affairs, Ylva Johansson. Commissioner, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome as well. You're joining us from Stockholm. You're there for personal reasons, and therefore we're really, really grateful that you could take time off to join us for this conversation. Commissioner, you may not remember this, but in 2017, you came to the State of Europe, Friends of Europe's flagship conference, and I was moderating a debate in which you were participating, and it was the middle or towards, in the middle of the so-called migrant crisis that Europe was facing. And there was a lot of talk of, invasion of people coming in from the Middle East, a lot of panic, a lot of hysteria. And I remember I asked you how you were coping. You were then Swedish Minister for Employment and Integration. And, there were many refugees going into Sweden. Sweden was welcoming them. And you just said, very, very matter-of-factly, very cool-headed, you said, we're managing and we will manage. And I thought to myself, wow, this is a lady who really knows what she's talking about. So my admiration for you dates back to then. Now you're European Commissioner for Home Affairs, and of course your portfolio is enormous. You have to deal with internal security, with counterterrorism, with Schengen. And of course, we know that Schengen's in a bit of a trouble at the moment as well. And of course, you have to deal with the hot potato, which is migration. And you're supposed to be drawing up, crafting a new migration and asylum pact. Now, asylum and migration have for a long time been really, really toxic narratives in Brussels. Hanif Qureshi, one of my favorite authors, a British author, son of migrants himself, has said that refugees and migrants are seen in Europe as invaders, as people bringing diseases and contagion into Europe. And he adds, they have no face, no status, no story. So my question to you, Commissioner, is now, given that we're in the COVID-19 crisis and we've seen the role, the vital role being played by essential workers, many of whom are from migrant backgrounds, do you think this is the right time for that narrative, that story on migration to change in Europe? Floor's yours, Commissioner.
And the answer to your question is yes, I think it is, but we're also having some risks. We can come back to that later. But I think that there are always this right-wing extremism or racist or xenophobic forces that would like to describe migrants like something unnormal, that would like to describe migrants as them or they. But that's not true. Migrants is something normal. Migration is normal. Migrants are here and have been here for generations. So we have a lot of migrants and a lot of people in migrant backgrounds, and they are part of us. They are part of we. And we see that now. It's very obvious now that migrants and people with migrant background are part of the essential workers that we really need. The country I know best, for example, 1/3 of the doctors are born outside Sweden, most of them outside EU as well. So they are now covering on the newspapers front page almost every day, these essential workers from different backgrounds. And I think this is true for Europe. So this is important to show, but it's also important to show that people that are victims of the virus, who actually lost their lives according to the virus, they are also from different backgrounds. Some of them are migrants or with migrant backgrounds. Those that are acting as volunteers, helping healthcare workers, so doing a lot of other help towards each other in society, these are also from different backgrounds. So I think what we see right now is that migrants are part of us. They are not they or them. And this is important. And this is important to stick to, because those that would like to make migration something scary, also try to make migrants scary, and they do it by taking away their faces and their names and make them diffuse others that are coming. But migrants are already here. And a normal year in European Union, we have around 1.5 million migrants coming regularly to our union. And without them, we would be much, much poorer union. So I think that, and at the same time, those that arrive irregularly to the unions are much fewer, less than 200,000 arrive irregularly. So I think that this is important to stress, that migration is a normal thing we can manage, and people with migrant backgrounds are part of us and part of society.
No, Commissioner, that's a very powerful message to give to Europe at any time, at the best of times. But in today's COVID-19 world, where people are quite traumatized, I think that's a very powerful and important message to convey. I was just wondering, in terms of us and them, do you think these narratives that you talked about, the fact that we need and are working so much with vital essential workers, do you think there's going to be a long-term impact of this phenomena on people's mentalities and perceptions of migration?
It depends on how we all act, I should say, because we could see that after the migration crisis in 2015, 2016, a lot of racist movements actually could gain a lot of power and influence in society. These movements are now being pushed back a bit by the COVID situation. They are fighting another crisis than the one that we are into right now. But of course they can come back. And we all know that when we are going into recession, and European Union is now going into the deepest recession ever in our history, with a lot of economic problems and with a lot of unemployment, of course it depends on how good we can deal with this, but it's going to have a huge impact. And we all know that that situation is always a risk for racist thoughts and movements to try to get stronger. So I think there is a fight to fight about how we see people, and that we do not let migrants be them.
So, Commissioner, second question, turning to the question of asylum, and we know that there have been suspension of asylum requests in many parts of Europe, and you've said quite recently that even in this crisis, this pandemic, we cannot ignore individual rights of asylum seekers. And you've also pointed to the role of technology as a factor that could streamline and speed up technology used for asylum applications. Could you elaborate a bit, please?
Yes, I think the first thing is very important. COVID or not COVID, people have their rights, and they always have their rights, even though we are into this COVID crisis. And people have the right to apply for international protection, and they have the right to have this application process. So these rights still remain. But I think that we also need to understand that, of course, it's a difficult situation in many member states, and trying to avoid the spread of the virus has also meant that the processes have been slowed down, asylum processes. It's been more difficult to meet in real life for the interviews, for example. That's why it's important to use also technology to make interviews and to make the possibility to do your apply for asylum online, for example. And we have put out guidelines for member states how they can help to continue with this processing, even though it's more difficult according to the virus. And these guidelines have been received very positively by the member states, I must say. So they are really trying to act. But there are some problems. For example, when it comes to resettlement, we have a lot of people in huge need of a new future in the European Union who maybe already have a decision that they should come to a specific member state. But all these resettlement processes have now been put on hold. People are waiting to come to the new country to start their new lives. So this is, of course, putting people in a very difficult situation, for example. But I must also say that we can also see right now in this crisis also action taken of practical solidarity between member states, and that is the relocation of unaccompanied minors from the Greek islands, from the overcrowded camps. We have pledges from member states for 1,600 unaccompanied minors and teenagers to be resettled. And we have been able to start with this relocation processes already. So some have been sent to Luxembourg to start a new future, 47 have been sent to Germany to start a new future, and now we are processing with other member states and even more also to Germany. So these 1,600 will be relocated the coming weeks. And we managed to do that even though there are problems with flights and testing and all that. So I think that that also shows that solidarity is alive.
So, Commissioner, how did you feel when you were discussing the fate, the destiny of some of the most vulnerable people in the world, these unaccompanied minors, and you found on the other side governments that were reluctant to do so? How did it make you feel personally?
I must say, there are two different kind of feelings, if I can say so. First, when it comes to unaccompanied minors, many of them are teenage boys. I'm a mother of two boys myself, and I remember when they were in these ages of 16 and 17, and you know, as a mother, you can see this son is the most wonderful person in the world, but I can realize it's not always obvious for others. So this is also a challenge. And if I was a mother of a teenage boy that has to be sent away to save his lives, I would have been asking every day for hoping that somebody in another country will see that he is such a wonderful person. So from my heart, I really see the big need of for these teenagers to get a new future. But I can also, as a politician, see that member states are hesitating a bit because they say we need a proper common European asylum and migration system. It's not acceptable that we have been stuck in a blocked situation for so many years that we have not been unable to find this common European migration and asylum system. And we will we would rather see this system to be in place instead of doing ad hoc solutions. And I can understand that also because we really need that, and it's not sustainable to continue with an ad hoc process for people that are so vulnerable and for the solidarity that we need so much in European Union. We need a proper system for that.
Commissioner, we're now at that time of the year when in normal times you should have been bringing out the new pact on migration and asylum, but of course it's on hold at the moment. There's lots of wrangling and discussion still going on. When do you think that pact can be unveiled?
Well, we are working very hard on that and we are on track, but of course the situation have changed and the Commission is now, of course, very occupied by the response towards the corona crisis, both immediately with a lot of things with equipment and healthcare and borders, but also now we are preparing for the recovery phase. But I do hope that we will be able to present it in the beginning of the summer.
Right. Let me now turn to all the people who are here on Zoom. And, you know, there are certain rules for you to ask questions. You have a raise your hand button that you can put up, and then I will give you the floor. But before and those who are watching online, you can go on hashtag FOE debates on Twitter and send your comments and questions to us as well. But first of all, we have a question from Debating Europe, which is an online chat with citizens, part of Friends of Europe. So let me turn now to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, let's go with your question, please.
Thank you, Shada, and thank you for your powerful statements, Commissioner. So I'm Elizabeth, the editor at Debating Europe, the online platform where citizens discuss Europe with policymakers. We have recently spoken to 100 young readers from our community, and they demand more commitment from Europe when it comes to migration. They even see a moral obligation to rescue refugees from the Mediterranean Sea, for example. What would you say to them, to our community?
Well, of course, there is always an obligation to save lives. That's our first priority. And there is an obligation for all member states to do search and rescue and to help people in distress in the Mediterranean. But that also means that we need a proper system for relocation of those that have been rescued in the Mediterranean as a result of search and rescue operations. But at the same time, I must say that this is not a good way for people to arrive in the European Union. Risking their lives at the Mediterranean Sea is really something that we should not do. People should not do that. And that's why I would not like to see people going into these boats, risking their lives at the sea. So that's why it's so important that we can provide other ways to come to Europe on legal pathways. That could be both through resettlement, that when European Union are now stepping up quite significantly, but also for others that are not in need of international protection, but would like to come to Europe to contribute to economy and to work here or to study here. We should have much better possibilities for people to come on legal pathways, because it's not satisfaction that people risk their lives at the Mediterranean. So this is always a balance. Of course, always saving lives, helping saving lives and saving people in distress. That's the first priority. But it's also my priority to stop people to go through this smuggler's boat and to stop these actually terrible human smugglers that do not only smuggle people, they also smuggle weapons and drugs. And I think this is organized criminals that we need to fight. And then people need to have other opportunities to come to European Union.
So just a very quick follow-up to what Elizabeth has just asked. Will the introduction of legal pathways into Europe for migrants, will this be part of the new migration pact?
Yes, it has to be, because I think we need migration, and we need to manage migration in an orderly way. And I started here to say that every year between 1 and 1.5 million people arrive in the European Union regularly as migrants. And this is what we should strengthen, the opportunity to come in a regular way, both for those that are in need of international protection, but also those that we need in our society, in our economy. So this is what we need to develop. I would also like to look into whether we could have more of what's sometimes called sponsored resettlement, or where local community or NGOs can also volunteer to welcome refugees besides of the ordinary resettlement program that also exists in member states. And some member states already have tried to explore this a bit, and I think with good experience. So this is also an area I would like to develop further.
So some innovative ideas in there to look forward to as well. Thank you for that. Let me take a question now from Carolee Hendricks. She's a European Young Leader, Friends of Europe's European Young Leader. Carolee, please come in and ask your question.
Yes, Carolee, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Jobatical, sending my greetings from Tallinn, Estonia. So Commissioner Johansson, you have been very strong advocate in terms of encouraging countries not to discriminate based on passports. First of all, I want to say thank you for that. But when we're now looking at the countries that are slowly opening its borders, we're seeing the opposite. We are seeing that borders are open to friendly countries or EU-only countries. So Mike, I have 3 questions for you. First of all, will European Commission somehow hold the European countries who will abuse this situation and will be discriminating travelers based on passport? Will you somehow hold them accountable? The second question in terms of traveling is that now that we have 100% accuracy for the antibody testing, then will this somehow be used as a permission to travel moving forward? Is that something that you have already discussed? And the third, what we are waiting to hear, especially being a leader of a company that has been bringing a lot of talent to Europe, when will be the non-EU traveling to Europe, especially for the specific talent groups like highly skilled talent? When do you think it will be resumed realistically? Thank you so much.
Commissioner, please.
Thank you for this question. I hope I can answer them all. Well, first, we presented guidelines last Wednesday on how to come back to step-by-step to a fully functioning Schengen area and to free movement in the European Union. And this is, of course, not all member states have made any travel restrictions or border checks. It's around 17 member states and Schengen associated countries that have done so. Others are still without restrictions for traveling. And this guideline says that when you open up a border, you can do it step by step. We think that's a good idea to be able to monitor the situation and to assess how the virus might start spreading again. But when you do so, you do not need to open all your borders at the same time. You can choose to open some borders before others. But when a border is open, then it's essential that all EU citizens are able to cross that border in the same way. You are not allowed to make any discrimination according to nationality. And this is going to be an important issue for the Commission to follow up on. And this is also because here it's a directive on the free movement that a member state has to follow. But there could be a situation, and some of this have been discussed now, when there are differences in the pandemic situation or the epidemiological situation on different sides of a border. How should they then deal with it? And hopefully they can make good arrangement between member states, but there could be a situation where a country with less spread of the virus hesitates a bit to open towards another country where there is more spread of the virus. But having said that, I must also say that we all know that borders or border checks is not a very good way of fighting the virus. I think that social distancing and other measures are much more effective ways than border checks. So I hope that member states can go from border checks into more risk-based checks instead of checking with everybody. So they're not allowed to make discriminations according to nationality. That is clear, and the Commission is going to follow up on that. When it comes to travel restrictions, they are also being now eased in step by step in many member states. This is something that they also need to have a close cooperation with the health authorities on how to do that so that we can keep the social distancing in a good way so we can manage with the situation. When it comes to the non-EU traveling, we still have restrictions at the external borders that have been prolonged until the 15th of June. We are now starting the discussion together with member states how and when to step by step also open up the external border restrictions for non-essential traveling. But having said that, we have also to take into account that in the roadmap that we have agreed on for coming back to normal or a new normal, living with the virus, we said that we should lift internal border restrictions before we lift external border restrictions. But from my point of view, I think that it's time now to at least start a discussion on how and when that should be.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. This is, of course, a very personal story for all of us. We often have partners living in different countries. We come together, we travel back and forth, and at the moment, it's extremely frustrating when we can't do that. So I think we're all looking forward to a little bit more leeway in at least traveling within Europe. Thank you very much for that. Questions are coming in fast and furious, Commissioner. You're in great demand. So let me turn now to Thomas Huddleston, Migration Policy Group. Thomas, please, floor is yours. Quick question, please. Thank you.
Yes, great. Thank you very much, Commissioner. We haven't had the occasion to meet yet, but the Migration Policy Group has been working with the Commission for 25 years, and I'm thrilled at the plans that you're putting out, even in these times of COVID. We've been working with the Commission through the European website on integration to monitor the COVID impacts on migrant integration. And we're not only seeing health impacts, but also social impacts, for example, through the Sirius network on migrant education, the big impacts this is having on children. Other work that MPG is doing looks at the impacts on migrant businesses, migrant-led organizations. So what I wanted to know from you is, what are the impacts on immigrant integration that you're most worried about from this COVID? And what's the data that you're not getting in order to properly plan an integration strategy that's really inclusive recovery?
Commissioner, please. And if I could just ask you also to just an add on to what Thomas has said, also the fact that inclusion is now more and more the word that we talk about rather than integration. And if you could bring that into your response. Thank you so much, please.
Thank you. It's a big question that you're asking because the situation first differs very much from one member state to another, but we also have migrants with very different situation. We have migrants that are not allowed formally to stay in the country, so they are living a little bit outside society. And these, of course, have a very, very difficult situation right now. We have others that have the permit to stay, but many of them work in are vulnerable workers, short-term contracts, and they are likely to be some of those that will lose their job first, or maybe already have lost their jobs and end up in a difficult situation. But we also have a lot of people, migrant and people with migrant backgrounds, that are really already part of society, are doing this essential work that we started to talk about, are really, really needed right now with their skills and with their competence in the labor market. So we have all this different kind of situation. So what I did was that I reached out to NGOs and social partners that are working with migrants to ask them, especially according to the current virus situation, how they see that this will affect migrant population in different countries. And we agreed that we should set up a new common approach, a common, I'm searching for the word, but to work together on how we can best do this together. But I think it's important now, also what you mentioned about inclusion here, that we do not, in our will to help very vulnerable migrants in societies that are really at risk right now, we should not go into the trap to show to make all migrants vulnerable, because migrants are also part of society, and this is about inclusion. That's where I started. Migrants and people with migrant backgrounds are part of us. They are part of those who really do the essential work right now. They are part of those who do the voluntary work right now. They are part of society. They are part of the recovery plan. So we have to be able to work with both these to help those that are vulnerable or maybe a bit outside society, but also to recognize how big part of our society really rely on people with migrant background. And from my perspective, I think that inclusion is a much better word than integration, because integration is it's a two-way process, of course, but it's not sometimes you have to stop to be integrated, and you have to start being included in society and being part of society and being part of we and us, and not focusing all the time on your migrant background, because I think that the situation we have in Europe and in the country I know best, about around 20% of their population has a migrant background. It's that we can't focus on background all the time. We have to focus on individuals, and they differ, and what and how people, irrespective of their background, can contribute to society and being part of society and being part of the recovery that we really need now. But your question, what I'm most afraid of, I'm afraid of a situation where we make distinction between we and them.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I wish some certain people in certain parts of Europe were listening to you and could speak as empathetically, if I may say so, about issues like this. And unfortunately, at the moment, there are few champions of migration. So it's really heartening and reassuring to hear comments like yours. Let me turn now to Josephine Goop. She's a European young leader as well. Josephine, please come in and ask your question.
Thank you. Dear Commissioner, I'd like to thank you for your time. My name is Josephine. I'm CEO of TechFugees. We are a community of technologists building technology for refugees with refugees to give them access to education, employment, as well as healthcare. Since the start of the crisis, we started to map online the progress that the COVID is making in refugee communities, as well as looking at how member states are reacting to protect those populations. Having said that, I have 3 questions. The first one is, you mentioned this, we've seen some states, EU members, not only slowing down the asylum process, but actually stopping it. Greece, France, and others. You mentioned supporting the use of technology to process those asylum applications and having issued guidelines. So I'd like to know where we can find those guidelines. I didn't see them. And how can we contribute to this as civil society? And with the community of technologists that I have.
Josephine, could you become a bit briefer, because I have 7 more people asking questions, so get on with it. Thank you.
So that would be my first. And the second and third question is, you've spearheaded an effort to evacuate 1,600 unaccompanied minors from the Greek islands. It's great. But the concept of hotspots at Europe's borders is flawed, and we see it for everyone. So how will you, with your New Deal for Migration, ensure that the decongestion of the Greek islands are for everyone? And lastly, going back to the suspension of right to asylums for new arrivals that happened in Greece before the COVID, how will you deal with such violation of international law? And what actions are you undertaking to ensure compliance with that international law?
Commissioner, please.
Thank you. First, I must say, actually, my impression is that member states would like to follow the EU acquis on migration and asylum. I haven't seen that they have stopped the right for people to apply for asylum. We had a situation in Greece in the beginning of March, when they had this very strange saying that they suspended their application, but now they are back on track and everybody has the right to apply for asylum, and this is the important thing. I can understand if there sometimes will be some delays in the possibility for people to apply for asylum according to this very specific situation where a lot of people are not actually at their workplaces anymore, but they can't wait for much long, and they have to have the right to apply for asylum. They have to have the right to their processes, and this is what we are following up with the member states, and this is essential, and this is going to be also very important for the new pact. And of course, it's important always to follow international law and international conventions. And this is also part of the very heart of the European values that we are here to defend. There was a discussion on this commission took office about the European way of life. The European way of life is to stand up for the right to asylum. European way of life is to protect people in need of international protection and to obey and follow international law. This is an important part of the values that brings us together and that we are proud of and that we should, of course, always stick to. With the new pact on migration and asylum, there's going to be a big focus on the processes to make sure that we can have more effective and efficient processes. We have to make the distinction between those that are eligible to stay and those that are not. Those that are not eligible to stay, they have to return. And that's why it's not humane if you have a very, very long process that will take years before a person got their decision. It has to be much quicker, and then we have to be more effective on returning people. This is important for the way to manage migration, but it is also important to be able for all member states to really welcome those that are eligible to stay, even though if they not because of international protection or for other reasons. Those that are eligible to stay, they are welcome. We're happy to have you here. We would like you to succeed in the labor market, your children to have a good time in school, and we would like to invite you to be part of our society, to be in inclusive manner, to welcome people into society. So there's going, in my new proposal, there's going to be a big distinction between a more stressed distinction between those that are eligible to stay and those that are not. And that means that we need to speed up the efficiency of the process for those that apply for asylum. And there we can help with the new, with the development of the agency, for example, for EASO.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So now, friends, we have 15 minutes. Apologies, we started late because of all the technical issues we've had. 15 minutes and quite a few questions. So if I could ask all those asking the questions to please make them as brief as possible so we can get more interaction with the Commissioner. So let me go now to Nicolai Nielsen from EU Observer. Nicolai, floor's yours. Quick question.
Yes, thank you very much, Nicolai Nielsen, EU Observer. I had a question. You mentioned that solidarity is still alive. Did you get that same impression when you went to Hungary and Poland to discuss your new pact on migration? And will this pact maintain any sort of concept when it comes to mandatory and automated distribution of asylum seekers? Thank you.
Commissioner.
Well, I know that you're all aware of the very difficult political situation, and that the proposal that the previous commission put out on the table in 2016 has been blocked in council. And that means if we accept proposals, I think there were good proposals from the previous commission, but they have not been able to proceed and not been able to come into reality. And if we accept that we stay with a blocked situation, in my view, that means that those countries that have the lowest ambition are able to set a standard. And this is not acceptable for me. So that's why I was given this task, which is a very difficult one, but I wanted it to unblock the block situation and to find a fresh start with a new proposal on a new pact on migration and asylum. And of course, this is a difficult one. You all know how much member states differ from each other when it comes to migration. But in my view, it's possible to find an acceptable compromise that could be accepted by everybody. And the way to do that, one is that I reached out to all member states. I've been traveling a lot before we had these travel restrictions, to all countries, to meet with the ministers and sit down in closed rooms, have a dialogue with them, but also to have a lot of dialogues with NGOs and other stakeholders that are important, and Parliament, of course. That this is one important thing, to really listen and to really discuss. Another important aspect is to make migration a normal policy area. A little bit, I would like migration to be, if you don't, a little bit like as boring as any other European policy area, not allowing leaders to climb high up in trees and make it very toxic. I think it's possible to reach a compromise. We are now into discussion in the European Union to find a compromise on the new MFF and on the recovery plan. It's going to be difficult, yes. Member states going to have different starting point, yes. But we're going to find a solution together. And this is the same approach that I'm having when it comes to migration. And I think that if you would like to have a good dialogue, you should not quote what the minister says in that dialogue. So I don't want to go into details, but I can say so much that when I'm more optimistic to find a solution now compared to when I started my traveling around capitals and my dialogues with member states. It's still difficult, but I'm quite optimistic that it's possible.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try and share your optimism, Commissioner, and try to avoid reading some of the more toxic remarks that are coming from certain parts of Europe. Let's turn now to Hiab Johannes. Hiab is from the University of Glasgow. Quick question, and then I'll go to Anila Noor from New Women Connectors, also a quick question. So please, let's get these two together. Hiab, floor is yours.
Yes, hi. I thank you, Commissioner, for your encouraging words. And I have a very simple question. How are migrants being involved or not in informing the policies that affect them directly, such as the migration compact you mentioned?
Thank you, Hiab. Could we go quickly to Anila as well? Anila?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a very honor to have this platform to have a question directly from you, Commissioner. So my question is is refugee, especially migrant women who are living in Europe, they have very less access to the information, very less access to all the opportunity, and this COVID-19 really pushed them further deep down in the more challenges. So how you think we are refugee-led, migrant-led initiative who are really trying with their own limited resources, how you think you can support us to reach out and create this platform to give them their voice or visibility? So how you think you, as having all the more resources, can help ground people like us who are really in the grassroots level, but trying to give them more benefit?
Yeah, thank you so much, Anila. Commissioner, please.
Thank you. Two really good questions. First, I recently took the initiative to set up an informal Commission expert group on migrant advisors, because I think that we are lacking the voices of people with their own experience of migration from different part of the expert levels. So this is what I'm going to set up now, this informal expert group of migrant advisors. Second question, I just reached out to NGOs and social partners to have this discussion on how we together, and how also I can help organizations to protect and encourage migrant communities and migrants right now in this COVID crisis. And this is an ongoing discussion that we have.
Thank you very much. Let me go now to Rahul. Rahul is my colleague who's been monitoring Twitter and those watching us online. Rahul, a quick question from you.
Yeah, thanks, Shada. Good afternoon, Commissioner. We've had a few questions and some of them have also been asked on Zoom, so I'll pick a different one. How have your experiences as Swedish Minister for Employment and Integration shaped your approach to migration as a European Commissioner?
Nice personal question, Commissioner.
In many aspects, I must say, I really wanted this portfolio when I had this opportunity to become a commissioner. And I wanted it for three reasons. First, I know how important migration is for the European citizens. They really would like us to manage migration, and people are frustrated, and right-wing extremists are gaining from that frustration as long as we are not able to manage migration in an orderly way. So I think this is a lesson learned. It's important to show to citizens, yes, we can manage migration. It's absolutely doable. Second, what I learned from my experience in Sweden is that this is a challenge with migration that we can't solve as a member state alone. If we do not have a common European system, it will be a race to the bottom, where member states are afraid of having lack of solidarity, and then we would see member states taking more and more restrictive measures. So that's why it's really, really important that we have a common European asylum and migration system. And that's why I'm going to compromise a lot to find that, because I think that we're paying a very, very high price politically every month that we do not have a common system. And individuals, people in the overcrowded camps on the Greek islands, for example, they're actually suffering from the lack of a common European asylum and migration system. So I think it's really, really important that we can get forward to find a compromise. That compromise will not going to be an ideal one. It's probably not going to be the one I would like to have the most, but I think it's really necessary that we can come forward and have a common system. And the third reason why I wanted this is that I also learned that words matter. I think it's really important how you talk about people and how you talk about migration. And in these times we are living in, we can hear political leaders in Europe, outside Europe, talking about migrants like if they were not human beings. And we can hear people or leaders scaring people with migration, like something that could destroy your society or like a threat towards society. And I think it's important to keep your head cool and your heart warm. It's possible to manage migration. As I said, as an answer to another question, it's not that everybody can have the right to stay in the European Union, but many people can have the right to stay. That's why we need to stand up for the right to asylum, and we need to develop legal pathways. But those that are not eligible to stay, they have to return. And we have also to stop the smuggling of the human smugglers that really make a lot of money out of people in a desperate situation. So we need to manage migration. And I learned from my Swedish experience that how important that is. But I also know that it's possible to manage a lot. In 2015, Sweden received 35,000 unaccompanied minors coming to Sweden in 2015. That was really a challenge. And still a lot of challenges remain in Sweden, but it was also possible to manage, even though a lot of things still need to be done.
Commissioner, you have to leave now. Do you, or can you take one more or two more questions? It's up to you. We delayed starting off, so we really are in your hands.
Two more questions, yes.
So we have a question from Latifa Gumar. She's from the University East London. Latifa, floor's yours.
Yes, hi, Commissioner. I'm just wondering if the guideline will still be applied in the UK despite the Brexit, and how the Brexit is going to affect all these guidelines from the Commission.
Brexit, Commissioner.
Well, the frank answer is we don't know yet, because we do not have a deal for what will be the relation between European Union and UK after they have left. So this is the negotiations that are going on right now. But I will not foresee that will be so much cooperation in the area of migration. I don't think so.
So, Commissioner, I missed what you said. Would you take just a few more minutes with us? Yes? Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. So we have two people who still want to come in, and I'll ask you both to be very, very brief. Come in one after the other. First, Tesfalem Yeman from the University of Leeds, and then Samson Teske from University of Roehampton. So quick questions, and then I'll give the floor to Commissioner. Please, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Commissioner. In reference to your position on people from refugees and asylum seekers from Libya using smugglers to cross the Mediterranean Sea, and how you felt it's a risky enterprise, but knowing what
you'll have to go, you'll have to press on your screen. We can't hear you very well, so please, could you do that? Your microphone. Again.
Hello. Sorry.
Yes, it's very. Unplug. I'm going to move to Samson, and please unplug and plug again, and I'll come back to you in a second. So Samson, let me give you the floor.
Okay, Commissioner, thank you. There have been some news about allowing asylum seekers to work, mostly temporarily, because, for example, if you take Germany, it says the news asylum seekers will be allowed to work up till October. So what is your take on this? Do you think this is, as many consider, exploitation of the migrants, or it is just giving them the opportunity that they have been looking for long? Thank you.
Thank you. Tesfalem, could you try again, please? Speaking louder.
Commissioner, thank you, Commissioner. I want to hear from you about your position on asylum seekers and refugees from Libya resorting to the smuggling network in order to cross the Mediterranean Sea, and in the context of what the European Union's role has been in Libya in the way of pushing migrants to other countries in the Sahel region and in Rwanda, for example. They have been promised that they will be relocated and resettled, but they have not. So would you say smuggling is the only option they have in the context of how Europe has tried to push them back and knowing what is happening to them in Libya? Thank you.
Commissioner, please.
The last one, the situation in Libya is extremely difficult, as you of course know, and it has not been better. So it's really, really difficult to act there. What the European Commission has been doing together with the UN organizations and also with the trying to set up a humanitarian corridor to help vulnerable refugees out of Libya to be resettled from Rwanda, for example. I think this is a good idea, but that depends also on that the resettlement can actually take place. So this is also what we need to work further on. We are also having had a cooperation on voluntary returns from Libya to the country of origin for people who would like to go back. And this has also been, I think, a quite good exercise that I think that we should also continue working on. But having said that, the situation is of course extremely difficult in Libya, and a lot of people are really, really suffering from this situation. And that's why we also need to search for a political solution out of this real crisis that is existing in Libya right now. The decisions that some member states are taking right now to deal with the situation where there are delays in the process, in the asylum process, in their countries, is to take a pragmatic solution to help so that people will not suffer from these delays. For example, to open up for them to work, or open up so they can access to healthcare and other rights in society. I think these are good practical solutions in a situation where you are not able to process the applications as quick as they should be processed. So I welcome these practical solutions, but of course, I think in the long run, it's better to have a quicker process so that you can have the full right, or otherwise you have to return.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner. This brings us to the end of what's been a very, very heartening and a fascinating conversation with you, Commissioner Johansson. I have to say, you probably have realized it, but we were supposed to start inside in Town Hall Europe. It would have been quite a different experience. Instead, my colleagues and I, we rushed outside where the noise of the alarm was a little bit less strident, if you like. And I'm working outdoors. You may or may not realize this. And my wonderful colleagues have helped me through this, let's say, rather unexpected process. I just wanted to say, Commissioner Johansson, and also friends, all of you who've asked the questions, and I apologize to those who haven't had their question answered, but I am sure, and I hope, Commissioner, you'll be back, because this is an ongoing story. This narrative, this conversation has not ended. And we often say, Commissioner Johansson, we often talk about female leadership and how that can be compassionate, more empathy, and as you said, warm hearts and cool heads. And I think all of us here would wish you real encouragement and good luck as you embark on a very challenging process of bringing forward a new migration pact on asylum as well. And when you talk about inclusion rather than integration, and also when you say it's no longer us and them, we're all in this fight in this world together. So once again, Commissioner, thank you for your patience as well and putting up with all these technical questions. Thank you everyone for your patience and your participation as well. Our strategic conversations will continue in the coming days. I'm not going to name them to you now. They're all on our website. We're all standing here and we're so grateful that we have technology and that it's worked. So stay safe everyone and stay healthy. Commissioner, good luck and good luck.